everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend and Publish, and welcome to episode 81, Peer Reviewing a Manuscript. As your career moves on through academia, you'll have more offers, most likely, as a scholar to review manuscripts. So these might be reviewing manuscripts submitted to a particular journal that you're pretty invested in. You might be on the editorial board, or it could just be a random one out of the blue. In addition to that, you might get book manuscripts that a press wants you to review and see if you'll serve as a reviewer. And then there's all kinds of other places you might be doing some peer reviewing, for example, conference proposals or grant proposals and so on. And so what I'm going to talk about in today's episode is how to handle getting one of these in terms of deciding if you're going to do it, and then how to make sure that this is not something that's taking more time than you necessarily have. So one of the articles that just came out in Inside Higher Ed in June, this is being recorded in June of 2022, and the article was mid-June, so just a couple of weeks ago from the time of recording this episode. And it was about how the peer review system is really in crisis because a lot of scholars will turn down invitations to review manuscripts. They just don't have time based on the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic at that time. They just don't have the time to take care of it. And so it's taking journals a lot longer to find peer reviewers. And, there's just a lot of back and forth in the process. And it was already kind of a tenuous system because in most cases it relies on the efforts of volunteers and the goodwill that somebody who says they're going to review is actually going to do it. And then the person who submitted the manuscript and might be waiting for it for, career momentum, a tenure decision, something like that, they're waiting to get it back. So if the whole system falls apart, it impacts people on multiple levels. It impacts the journals because they can't find enough reviewers, and it impacts the scholars because they're waiting for their work and so on. And so there was a statement in that article that got me thinking. It was by Ken Kolb at Furman University. And basically, he had put out a Twitter post saying that, if you're somebody that is tenured and you're in one of those fortunate positions, you should be doing some peer review pretty regularly. And I did take that to heart. Over the past 2 years, I've definitely been a faculty member that has kind of put the brakes on reviewing a little bit. Like many academic parents, I had children home during the pandemic. I taught more students. I had more support. And I also supported tenure and promotion faculty at my institution who were trying to submit a dossier without face-to-face supports on campus. So, I had some reasons for not doing it, but I did think about that a little bit more. And what I decided to do was do a quick episode on how I actually do these when I do them, because I think that one of the reasons people turn down peer reviewing positions is that they feel like this is just going to take a lot of time. And some of them do, but I think that there is a more efficient way maybe to go about doing it. And so I'd like to share what I'm going to do because I think this is sort of fortuitously, I ended up getting a request to review a manuscript for a book on writing productivity. So this is my area of research. I'm interested in it. That's one of the reasons I think you should be peer reviewing is hopefully you're getting some articles or manuscripts in your area of interest. But I hadn't done one for a book in a while. It had probably been a couple of years. I've done, some articles and things. And so what I decided to do was talk through how I would do it. And so really the process for reviewing an article and reviewing a book proposal are mostly the same with one caveat. A book proposal sometimes comes with more pieces to it to look at. So it's not like you're looking at one manuscript. A lot of times you're looking at the book proposal pitch itself, you're looking at sample chapters, you're looking at a table of content. So the volume of the material is a little bit bigger, and that's what I'm looking at in my latest peer reviewing job. But really the rules for a lot of it are the same, and the way that I've been managing to squeeze these in my career in a way that I feel is fair, that I'm doing my fair share as somebody in the academic community, but also in a way that's fair to the scholars that I'm reviewing. So here's what I do. In general, I get an invitation to peer review and I decide immediately if I'm going to do it or not going to do it. Because I know, especially from being on editorial boards and journals and being section editors, that if I don't say yes or no right away, then that scholar is waiting on their manuscript, and the person who has to hunt for reviewers has to then wait to hear from me before giving it to somebody else, particularly when we're thinking about the way that manuscripts move through these scholarly publishing systems. So I decide right then and there if I'm going to do it or not. And the way that I decide is, will this resource, when published, be something that I might rely on? Meaning, I'd be interested in reading it if I was a scholar. I would potentially use it in some of my own research. It might be a new area I hadn't thought about before, but I could see using it. But in short, I have a kind of a narrow frame with just deciding if I'm going to do them or not. And for me, the frame is, am I interested in this topic? Is it something that I could potentially use, or is it something that I would want out in the field for my discipline? So, these are some of the decisions that I make personally in my areas in writing productivity and academic time management. That's the stuff I care about. So, any kind of academic books about, or articles about writing productivity or time management or any of those topics work, but also how to prepare doctoral students, how to prepare faculty. I can kind of spread that out a little bit into some issues in higher education. But manuscripts that maybe come in that are generic in my field. So maybe a manuscript about a teaching practice that I don't do and I don't teach those classes. I'm going to pass on that one because I'm probably not the best reviewer anyway. But also, I'm not going to be innately interested in that manuscript probably to read it. And so this is one of the reasons why I decide yes or no immediately when I open the email for the invitation, because if it's yes, there's a good chance I'm interested in the topic and interested in the material, which will make me interested in doing the review. And I do think that that's part of, part of the game of making sure if you say you're going to do a peer review that you actually do it. I think a lot of us say yes out of guilt, or, oh, well, I have to do this review for this journal or they'll never publish my work. And, we work from that kind of an angle, but it does work better if you're genuinely interested in the manuscript, because there's just a higher chance you're going to do it. And then my second rule of thumb with these is that once I have the invitation and once I've said yes, no matter what, I get rid of that review within 2 weeks. I don't wait. I just, I just don't. And part of this is because I know that many academics like myself are juggling so many pieces right now. I'm afraid I won't remember, even with all the calendar reminders, even with everything in the world. I have a full-time faculty position. I run Defend and Publish. There's just no way I'm going to remember it. And so I just accepted this review. And so in my mind, I know when my deadline is to finish that, which is within that 2-week timeline of reviewing the invitation. And in that case, I do drop a note on my calendar and I say, that's the deadline. It doesn't matter that they gave me 6 weeks or 8 weeks. I didn't even look at what their actual deadline is. I just know what my deadline is. So from the point of saying yes, a 2-week window is all I'll give. It doesn't matter if it's a book project. It doesn't matter if it's an article project, because I'm going to talk about time about that in a second. But for me, that's another parameter for me. So I see if I like the topic, I say yes or no. I should say something about the no's, because sometimes people feel very guilty turning journals down and editors down. But if I can, I will suggest other reviewers that I know might be more appropriate. I do also tend to try to suggest newer faculty, but not first or second year, who probably need some experience with doing the reviewing. So then as they become senior scholars, they can do, some of that work in other capacities. But I definitely don't want to stick a first or a second year faculty member with it, because, this might be something that they have to do on top of some other, getting acclimated to their university type positions. But yeah, I try to find somebody around there. I also try to avoid people that I know are genuinely overworked. So I'm not going to suggest a reviewer, a reviewer's name if I know that person is already drowning. So I try to find people that seem to have the interest and capacity. If I can, sometimes I can't recommend a reviewer, and then I will just very politely pass, say, this project really isn't in my area at this time. I really can't take it on, best of luck finding another reviewer, and boom, I'm finished. So then I want to talk in the last couple of minutes here about what I do when I'm actually writing this review, because here's the part where a lot of us get trapped, even senior scholars, even experienced reviewers. I think our tendency as academics is to always, want to do an A+ job and a great job. And this is somebody's livelihood, right? These manuscripts that are coming in are often from new scholars or scholars that need them to go through the tenure promotion pipeline. Or they might be, some senior scholar's essay that's, really going to be kind of their final pinnacle of their work. Some of it's science related research that's very timely and needs a decision. So, if we're just trying to think about what are some ways that we can do this in an equitable way that makes it easy for me to do it as a reviewer and not be either using too much of my labor to do it or resentful that I have used too much. So these are some of the parameters that I've come up with that really work for me. So one of the things that I always do is look at the reviewer questions or the checklist first before I actually read the manuscript. I think a lot of us do this, but I think it's just good practice to see what it is you're supposed to talk about in your review before you actually go and do the review. And then I do two other things. In general, I tend to print these out. I know a lot of people don't, but I like a good old fashioned, like printed out article. And if the book project is not too big, I might even print that one too. And that's partly because I like to use, I would say, kind of less ideal times for writing, but times where I could still do some academic work to knock out these reviews. And sometimes for me, that's sitting in a car waiting for a kid to finish practice where I'm alone and it's quiet. I could actually be doing the kind of work there. And so what I do is I basically have the reviewers' questions, I have the printed copy of it, and then I read through and I make some quick notes on that reviewer sheet underneath the questions. So in general, especially for journals, there's always an article or a question, something about fit with the journal. So is this manuscript appropriate for publication in XYZ journal? If that question isn't on there, the editor may do that before it even gets to a peer review stage. But in general, that's there, or something along the lines like, is this topic going to be of interest to readers? This is one of the reasons why I make sure that I'm somebody that would actually read it so I could say yes and why with some clarity. So this is another reason why picking projects that actually are, based in your own research or something that's going to be interesting for you as a researcher or a teacher is really essential here. So I do kind of a quick read through the manuscript. I make notes on that printed, peer review sheet so I can type it up later and I don't forget. Another thing that I will do is I actually make sure, let's say one of the questions is about the overall argument and I'm not clear on the argument. I do like to find 2 or 3 specific spaces in the manuscript where I can quote it and suggest something. But notice I said 2 or 3. I don't say 12. So once I find those 2 or 3 that I could suggest, those are the ones I suggest. And so I will make some quick notes like, hey, on page 3, they need to do XYZ. On page 12, they need to do XYZ. Page 17, this isn't essential, but it would be a good idea to XYZ. And then one of the great things about it, once I'm filling in these questions, I can very quickly then go back to my computer, open up the peer review sheet or the system or whatever it is, start answering the questions based on my notes. And then if I need to copy and paste some passages from the actual manuscript in, I can do that. So that's pretty much how I go about doing it. A couple other quick things. There are always, well, I shouldn't say always, but in every review I've ever seen, there's always been something about suggestions for improvement for the author or, things like that. So I also try to find something where I can really put my stamp on the review. And I don't mean saying, hey, you should cite Christine Tulley. She's a great scholar. I don't mean it like that. I just mean like I try to think of a way that the manuscript could be improved in a way that maybe the author hasn't thought of, because this is one of the great things about peer reviews. You have this engagement with other scholars that, they may be thinking about it differently than you. They might have different suggestions. And so I try to have, in addition to improvements, I know everybody would probably want them to make. So for example, clarifying the argument or the organization or explaining XYZ methodology further. I try to find something really unique that I could do to help them. And in my case, my special thing, and I'll put it out there so anybody else who wants to try to do this can, but one thing I always try to look at is just the ordering of the content in the article. And I'll say things like, this manuscript actually could be really improved if section 2 came before section 1, and here's why. Or paragraphs 3 and 4 are really outstanding. I would really like to see them flipped with the opening paragraphs because it's a much stronger anecdote. Like I try to give a positive piece of writing, so when the scholar gets their manuscript back, they can read it and be like, wow, this was a good experience, because I know that my review is coming in as one, but I don't know what they're getting as the other reviews. And we've all been around. I think it's reviewer B or whoever we all kind of shame on Twitter for writing mean reviews to scholars, but somebody generically named reviewer B. But I don't know what that other person who's reviewing is going to do. And one of the things I started taking to heart a little bit more is that I would like a culture of writing practice across academia, across a global context where people are reading in the spirit of helping each other, suggesting things that are good for the manuscript, good for the research, and less about picking out things that are tiny to pick on, and just so on. And that's too much for a podcast here, but just in general, I try to make my review a positive encounter for that scholar, because so many scholars certainly get negative reviews, drop out of the pipeline, never do anything with the revise and resubmit, and so on. So those are some things I try to do. And then graduate students that are going on to become PhD students, particularly in my program, we have many that are out in PhD programs now. I direct a master's program at the moment. But one of the things I did talk to them about is when you take on this kind of work, when you eventually get to do it, put a time limit on it. So in my mind, I'm not going to give a book proposal project more than 3 hours. There's no more. So what I will do is on my phone, I try to knock it out in an afternoon or maybe 2 afternoons of like an hour and a half a piece, which will be what I'll be doing with this manuscript. I set the timer on my phone. I do what I can. That's why I'm making sure I'm answering the questions. And then if I have a little bit of time for extras, I'll do them. If not, I won't. I'll just answer the questions. So I'll do a 3 hour timeline for a book pitch or a book proposal. And for journal articles, I really try to have those totally completed, submitted, and finished within an hour and a half. That doesn't include the reading time. It just includes the writing time, because for me, the reading time, I'm kind of, since I've already picked a topic I'm interested in, I don't feel as though that's my labor. I know it is, but I don't feel in that same way. So, this is the way that I make sure this review isn't hanging around on my desktop for 6 weeks, or it's just kind of unfinished and laying there. And just to close pretty quickly about this, if you're writing one for the first time, we do have a couple of people that will come to Defend and Publish and say, can I just borrow your eyes for a half an hour? If you're a brand new scholar, this is an excellent use of our free consultations for 30 minutes. If you check out our website for defendandpublish.com, if you click the button, you can sign up. This would be a great 30 minutes with us. You can see how we coach, and we can help you get that review done. And if you're somebody that already has worked with us, certainly a quick half hour with us can help you tighten up the review, or at least finish it off and get rid of it. Because one of the things that I talk a lot about on our podcast is mental bandwidth. And this is one of those things where you really do need to be doing some review to just also see what kind of scholarship is out there in the world. But you don't want it to be something that's always taking away from your own work. So you don't want to be the super reviewer that's trying to review 20 manuscripts in a month or something like that. So you might even decide, how many will you do a year? And for me right now, those numbers are, I'll do one book and one article a year. That's it. And there's not that many people doing my kind of research. So I don't get that many requests of things that I would actually say yes to. But that's kind of my numbers. I'll do one book, I'll do one article, and then that's it. For people that need to do more service activities for your dossier, for maybe a lecturer position, or somebody on the tenure track, if you have to kind of show this disciplinary service, you might end up doing more. I did. My university counted this for as part of tenure for professional service outside the university. I could count manuscript reviews. So, I think at that point I was maybe doing like 3 or 4 a year, but I definitely was not doing every single review that came across my way. Maybe that's a closing point, is just to try to think about, do I want to read this topic? Would I be willing to read it otherwise if it wasn't a peer review? How can I use the reader's questions to just help guide my reading through the manuscript so I can give them the answers back that they want? And then finally, how can I make sure my time is really limited? And for me, I do read it ahead of time before I get to the writing, but once I get to the writing, I'm not spending any more time than 3 hours on a book and 1.5 on an article. And a lot of my articles, I can knock them out in like 45 minutes. I'm pretty quick. Okay, so if you have any questions, please come back to me at Christine at Defend and Publish. We'd love to, hear some questions or thoughts on that. And if you know anybody that's reviewing a manuscript, share this episode with them. Happy writing.